Welcome to From the Mind of Christine McConnell. This is our Halloween episode, so I figured what is more fall than a really spooky looking haunted scarecrow. I wanted to do this project kind of using natural, easy materials that you could either forage from the woods or find around your house. So I'm going to be setting my hot glue gun aside for this episode and kind of just drilling everything together and tying pieces and trying to make something that looks like it could have been made at any point in history. The first step was to go out into the forest and look for pieces of wood that could make up the skeleton of my scarecrow, as well as the head and the pelvis. Okay, let's stop for a second and talk about safety. This is my first time using a chainsaw ever, and it is most likely going to be my last time. I was not being careful enough. I was not sort of pinning things down to a steady piece of board and then cutting the pieces off. I was letting my appendages get too close to the blade. Don't ever do what I'm doing here. Because this is very foolish, and I actually had 2 close calls with this thing, enough to the point that I was like, maybe I'm just gonna stick to my jigsaw for the future.
I don't like chainsaws.
I created a rib cage on my scarecrow using the part on a branch where it sort of forks off, cutting off the edge and then adhering one section of that to the spine. This is another moment where I really should have clamped down my piece to the table and not put my foot right there. I'm making my scarecrow posable by inserting steel screw eye hooks into these like edges and then tying those pieces together with rope. And then this will make it so that I can sort of set him up in any position I want and he'll have the movement of a natural figure. Because you're dealing with delicate branches, I had to pre-drill absolutely everything. So make sure to do that if you're going to tackle this project. I'm building up a face using just random pieces of branch. This is a step that if the Scarecrow was going to be inside, hot gluing would just be so much easier. That said, it is going to be outside in the elements, and sometimes hot glue can sort of shift and change around. So I'm totally foregoing that step and just screwing everything together. So this next tip is something a patron actually suggested, which was using a polymer clay out in a size that is obviously too big to go into an oven, and then using a heat gun to set it. I researched it and I saw sort of contradictory things, so this was my first time trying it. It 100% worked for something like this. So thank you, whoever said that. And this is totally a really great tip. There is something about a big gnarled bump on a nose that I personally just find so regal and appealing. I want this clay to blend in pretty seamlessly with the branches, so I'm using a sculpting tool to just sort of create the grooves of natural bark. I then blasted it with a heat gun for probably about 15 minutes. You want to make sure your room is ventilated for this part of the process. Because I haven't actually unpacked all of my things from California, my fabric is still stowed away. So I had to run to Joann Fabric to get what I needed. And sadly, they didn't have exactly the colors that I wanted. So I did also pick up some dye and stained everything to look as dingy and old as I could get it. So that probably looked like it took one day based on I'm wearing one outfit. But what I have found with filming a project, obviously, that takes this long, is that if I were to try to wear a different outfit for every day that I worked, I would burn through a million clothes. So that was actually a few days. And now we are ready to move on to the next step of this process. I'm creating a really rough looking hat for my Scarecrow by making a base skeleton out of wire and then laying burlap over it and then sewing it on. The brim of my hat kept needing to be adjusted, so it looks kind of small here, and then by the end of the project, it was humongous. Something that is so incredibly liberating and fun about making something that is intended to look tattered is you don't have to be careful. The rougher it looks, generally the better. I decided to sew some rough pieces of bark onto that top of the hat, and it gave it such a cool, sort of fairy tale-ish kind of look. Before adhering any hay, I wanted to bulk up my figure just a little bit and create some stability. So using some twine and bark, I kind of gave it a little bit more shape. I affixed the straw to the skeleton by tearing strips of muslin and binding it directly onto the skeleton. This looks extremely rough, but we're ultimately going to be covering it with fabric, so it really doesn't need to be any more complicated than this. To get the shape of my scarecrow kind of going in the right direction, I very roughly stitched on some sections of burlap, and this gave me the ability to not only give him a little bit of a better silhouette, but also make sure that straw wasn't just going to fall out. I knew I needed the arms to stick straight out, so I affixed a board, which ultimately wasn't long enough, to his spine, and then just kept screwing on additional pieces until it was long enough. I realized that he was going to need a pair of pants, and obviously his measurements are going to be a little bit strange, so I got a little bit lucky. I don't have a pattern for pants, and so I cut out what I know is the general shape of them and stitched it together and made sure it was long enough, and it kind of just worked out perfectly. I made sure to leave the fly area open of the pants because I wanted to easily be able to get them onto my Scarecrow, and then also use some rope to kind of stitch them up together. I really quickly made some makeshift suspenders, and this step was so incredibly simple and fast, but it really kind of pulled together the entire look of the outfit. I went to a place locally called Pumpkin Junction, which sold these sort of tattered pieces of shroud, and this is going to be the top layer of my Scarecrow's outfit. If you're in a pinch and you need something like this quickly, you can dye cheesecloth and it will sort of have the same effect. And now we're getting to the really fun part of sort of distressing this guy, staining everything. I used acrylic paint, so I know he's gonna be outside. I hope that's gonna hold up, but we will find out, and I think it's gonna make a big difference in how he looks. I was able to create some really fun, spooky looking hands for my Scarecrow by snapping fairly fresh branches that weren't going to completely just break off and affixing them to a board, roping them to the hands, and then also doing a little few additions of that sort of polymer clay technique that I used on the face. I found that by painting lighter shades of beige and gray on the tops of the shoulders and the highlights of the Scarecrow, and then going down to those bottoms and painting sort of darker browns and blacks on the tattered tips, gave the entire thing kind of a sun-bleached ombre that looked really natural and aged. And that is our Scarecrow all finished. I knew moving here this first year I wasn't going to be able to do something big and crazy in the front of the house. So I'm so jazzed that I was able to pull something off that is out front, so when people drive past, they know something funny and strange is happening in this house. I obviously was very heavily influenced by the creeper from the movie Jeepers Creepers, who I think is like the creepiest movie monster that's ever been made. So I'm excited to like sort of watch people walk past and watch their expressions. So I have a bunch of stuff planned for November, December, and beyond. So stay tuned. I hope you all have a very safe and spooky Halloween this year.